Hello, this video is called I Believe It Has a Broader Application. Those were the words of Minister Blair. This is my point of view regarding Day 27 of the public inquiry to the federal government for invoking the Emergency Act on February 2022. Today is November 21st, 2022. The agenda for today is overview, today's witnesses, and my point of view. We're doing the daily comments, not the full summary of the testimonies in the inquiry that seeks to understand if Justin Castro had valid reasons to invoke the Emergency Act on February of this year, and if the powers used by the federal government exceeded the scope granted by the Act. Based on the findings of this inquiry, the lead commissioner will put forward a recommendation in both English and French by February of next year. Remember, this is not a trial, and as we have discussed in previous videos, this is not an inquiry. And all my videos are found on Lisa Bruce Research on YouTube, as well as my own website, lisabruceresearch.com. And this is the website where you can hear the testimonies live, and also the historic files are also there. Today we had a very lengthy day between 9:30 and 8:10 p.m. We had the panel of CSIS as well as Bill Blair, and we are going to get in a different manner of presenting the information today. I want to talk about key takeaways as opposed to go into details of what the different witnesses were saying, because I think there were very important things and findings from today. Here are the specific names and the titles of the CSIS panel. And in spite of the evidence, I think that we had already seen until this moment everything in writing from David Vigneault. We're saying that he was not supporting of the, quote, invocation of the act because the threshold for the CSIS criteria was not being met. But we're going to see that actually he supported the act, which was very surprising, and yet that's what happened. So the key takeaways: number one, the government wants to reform the CSIS to expand their ability to spy on us. So David said, CSIS was created in 1984, needs to be updated because the world has evolved. So what I can hear is that what he wants is to see how to get in a more invasive manner through all the areas of our daily life. Currently, in order for the CSIS to investigate a person, they need to feel that they have met the threshold of the activities. And I say feel because clearly this is not about the law. We're going to see it in a minute. Here we were talking about the IMVE criteria, and I have said in my previous videos I don't like that term because it's just extreme violent extremists. I don't believe in that, to be honest, but that's actually a criteria that the government of Canada created, and they have a whole chart where they explain everything, and the short version was explained by this lady Michelle. The rules are here. You have to be willing to do that. You have to seek societal change. You have to have ideological influence, and you'll be ready for serious violence. And what is interesting is that I think that Justin Castro actually meets two of those criteria. So the first one is that he makes a lot of very divisive and racist comments. We're going to see an example of those at the end of the video. I place them sometimes in my videos. We're going to see them again today. And obviously he wants to change society because bodily autonomy has always been present in every society for multiple years, but he wants to change that. So what about you investigate him? And also we know that these injections are killing a lot of people. The most recent information that was published November 20th, I posted a couple of slides last night on Twitter, talk about over 20,000 people per week dying in Canada, and the total for the 38 countries that include Europe and the US, of course, are a total of more than 750,000 people per week in average up to September of this year. So pretty scary, and obviously they continue to press for us to take this injection. Now, interesting for us to know, any type of anti-public health rhetoric, as they say, is not susceptible to be investigated by CSIS, or at least not up to this point in time. So clearly, maybe they're going to change that. And here is the part that I was very surprised. He actually supported the Emergency Act, which contradicts every written report. And here is a statement from February 13. He advised the Prime Minister of his belief that it was indeed required to invoke the act because his scope was too narrow to cover the national security threat. So remember that we talked a couple of days ago about the exchange of emails of this private council talking about the definition or lack of definition of national security, and obviously they just went into unknown territory to justify the invocation of the act. And then the most important part perhaps of the whole day was the fact that Brendan, that is the Freedom Convoy counselor, he definitely hit a chord. He was trying to get confirmation of the identity of the person who carried this flag. I'm not going to say certain words, you know why. I don't want to be pulled. And his question for David was, have you identified the individual, the one carrying the flag? Did you know that he's Brian Fox from Enterprise? I did a mistake here. And then he said, well, and then obviously he didn't answer. And then the lead commissioner intervened. He did not allow the witness to answer, which is interesting. Why don't they want that answer to come out? If this is such a horrible thing, why don't we find out who this person is? So the person in question came out already, said that they want to launch a lawsuit, or at least trying to see if they can launch a lawsuit against Brendan. And he said that he's actually protected by the whole inquiry so that he cannot be sued. And then in the website of the company, that they do a lot of lobbying and media training, and you can go to a website. They have a lot of areas, but definitely they do lobbying for the Liberal Party. And interesting that he's being accused in this inquiry that he was the one with that horrible flag. So what is interesting, obviously, is that Brendan is a lawyer. He's not going to accuse somebody without any proof. And for those of you who have never seen the image, this is the image. And when you look online about this, so the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa, you can see that this is the place where the picture was taken. So when you look online, the only place across the whole chateau that has these windows with these stairs is this area. But when you look at other angle of the same place, you can see that this part belongs to the hotel. This is not in the street. In other words, there must be a security camera somewhere showing who is this person, and it was perhaps a guest of the hotel, but it's impossible that they don't know who this person is. Incredible. The lead commissioner came and saved the moment for the people who want to hide who is this person. Then it was the turn for Minister Bill Blair. He talked about his background, and obviously most of you may have heard of him. He was the chief of police of Toronto, and he is very infamous for the way he handled the G20. He was very proud of it, but as everybody knows, the images of violence on that horrible summer of 2010 are very clear, and most importantly, there are some settlements that have taken place relatively recent, less than 2 years ago, and you can see the level of settlement that took place because of the manner in which the arrests were taking place. So you can see here how they were doing some cordons of people, and they would keep them for hours and then take them to detention centers. So because of the unlawful arrests, they had to pay a lot of people, and that's exactly something that he shouldn't be proud, but apparently he is. And then I did a little bit of body language observations because this gentleman was extremely odd. He was just asked at least 3 times in the first 10 minutes to slow down, because this is being translated, and I have done translations, simultaneous translations in the past, and you need a certain rhythm. Of course, you can get, the more you do it, the easier it is. But the speed of this man was impossible. I was actually trying to do Spanish translations while he was talking. It was not possible. So he was speaking extremely fast, and apparently, if you look a little bit into body language, that's what it means. Perhaps he was very nervous. Another thing that noticed that he was constantly touching his nose, and you can see here how it may mean that he's keeping secrets. It was excessive. It was not once or twice. His body language, he was touching his body all the time. He was really odd. He was not blinking. Also, the blinking rate was between 5 to 8 times per minute. That's not normal. The norm is about 12 to 15. So he's about 50% of what the norm should be. And the blink rate, obviously here showed a decrease in blink rate, may indicate deception. I am not a body expert, but what else can explain the combination of speaking too fast, not blinking, and touching your nose and your face constantly, particularly while being on the stand? You're being taped and you're a public figure. Why? Now let's talk about the key takeaways. I want to mention that these are not in chronological order, so I have a mix of direct examination and cross-examination because I wanted to group the different areas that I think he tackled. And the reality is that the repetitiveness of the whole set of string of lies, I would say, is consistent. So the first one is denying the existence of a plan. So here you can see notes from February 10, and then the question from the commission counselor was, why was the government so disconnected? And he actually, and I'm talking about the commission counselor, he used the expression, they were like ships passing in the night. Why? And the answer was, well, Ontario was not showing up to meetings. What? What do you mean? I mean, everything is happening in Ontario. What do you mean it's not showing up to meetings? You should have time to go on a Zoom call and understand what is the scope of the situation and how you can coordinate efforts to solve it. And then he said, well, but the deputy ministers were in contact with the counterparts. No, you have to be in the meeting, you have to be in the call. Ontario was very frustrated because there was an unwillingness to put boots on the ground. I personally don't like this expression, but that's how they talk. And then Mendocino, who's actually going to be the witness tomorrow, is responsible for connecting with the RCMP, but again, no specific plans were discussed with me. Then they went on talking again about that on February 13, Lucky still believed in a plan. Answer, I was not aware of any plan. The question, even though you were in all cabinet meetings, IRG meetings, etc., correct, denying. Question, this is Ottawa Police Counselor, so this is the cross-examination. The communication between parties obviously was not working. And the answer was, I was hoping that it would be able to resolve it. This sounds to me like the balance of the budget from the crime minister. The budget balances itself. Question, the team came up with a plan on February 9 and it was signed on February 13. I don't have a recollection. Well, we had on February 13 an integrated plan. It was created and signed off. I didn't know. Well, what about slowly frustration? There was an internal issue that we needed to manage. Well, some people were talking, making assumptions about police response. He just went into rants that seriously nothing was coming out except a lot of stories that I don't even understand why they were so incredibly ranting. Here, it was an interesting moment at the end of the day. I'm going to say about 7:30 perhaps. The counselor for the government of Canada was about to start his cross-examination, and then Brendan, that is the counselor for the Freedom Convoy, interrupted and said, we have new unredacted evidence that was provided to us a few minutes ago. Can I please have 5 minutes to re-question the witness? And then the lead commissioner said yes. And then he came up and he said, February 12, minutes from the ministerial meeting. The question was on February 12, the plan presented to the minister was approved by the OPP and the OPS. And the answer is, I believe this was part of the discussion. And then he said, I have no recollection of what you just said. He's just denying, again, the existence of the plan. And then the question was, if on February 12 at 5 p.m. a plan was approved, why was the Emergency Act invoked? Well, invoking the Emergency Act was not contingent to a plan, but to have a peaceful resolution. Well, emergency plan is not a peaceful resolution. A plan is and was the peaceful resolution. And then he said, I don't have insight about what the plan was, and they have been working on one, but we don't have particulars. Very vague and obviously denying. And he's going to get into something really interesting. He said, in all cabinet meetings, the plan is attached as a document. So you had the document, right? Answer, I don't know what you're referring to. Oh my gosh. He has the proof in front of him and he keeps on denying. Incredible. Key takeaway number 2, he wanted violence, and he definitely was supportive of the Emergency Act even before anything else was presented as an option. So here he's talking, and I'm talking about the Commission Council, he's talking about the Quds plan, and there is a communication which Blair says that it was a weak response. And then he asked, why did you say it was a weak response? Because we wanted to help Alberta with financial and truck assistance, and we couldn't, and the police equipment was not appropriate, and we couldn't provide the adequate one. Yes, because what he wanted was to see some violence there. That's what I hear. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Question from the Freedom Convoy counselor. You and the PM were considering the emergency act from the very beginning. No. And obviously he's provided proof. Criticizing peaceful options and supporting the emergency act from day one. And obviously their notes. Here, February 4, there is a person who's taking notes in a meeting, and then the wording is their current strategy, emergency act. And then with the notes in front of him, he said, no, I didn't say that. And then Brendan, the counselor, said, in February 13, you went on Global News and you said that the Emergency Act was a consideration from the onset. No, I didn't say that. Question, by January 27, your colleagues and you had agreed to a joint government response. You were going to label the protests violent. That was your intention from day one. I disagree. It's not an agreement. It's just a recommendation. What? That's even worse. Here you have the counselor for the Windsor Police Services. Were you aware that the Ambassador Bridge was opened prior to the Emergency Act? I was aware that they would move to another place and it was cleared, but there were concerns about keeping it open. So this is how he supports the Emergency Act being required even after the blockade at the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor was over. The counselor for the government of Saskatchewan really loved what he did today. He presented only one document. He spoke very slowly, and he told him, did you share concern about talking publicly about the Emergency Act? And then again, he started to stutter. He went on a rant. He doesn't answer any question, but obviously he's just lying all the time. It's just incredible. I've heard a lot of lies through these 20 plus days, but he's brutal. Every statement is a lie. Here, the question from the Criminal Lawyers Counselor, the association, he said, the question was, there was mistrust between the police agencies, so that lack of communication clearly affected the invocation of the act. The answer, let me agree, communication is very important in our society, and he went on for, I don't know, 1 minute, 2 minutes, I don't know. But if they were not effective, then the situation was unique and it required a unique response. Excuse me? So what you just said is that because you were unable to handle the situation, then let's use brutality against the citizens to get rid of this protest. Oh my gosh. Question, was this a good execution? This was a question from the Council of the Government of Canada. And of course, they're going to show the drone images of the, quote, peaceful dismantle of one area of the protest. And of course, they're not going to show the horses. You can see the way he's looking at the video. It was maybe, I would say, a minute video of the drone. And then obviously, he's very interested in this. I wonder why. Number 3, building and supporting a false narrative. So here, the Commission Councillor is talking about why is he concerned about all these blockages, and he's talking about, well, this is so going to impact the health and safety of Canadians. Really? What about this? That's not your concern? Firearms in Alberta elevated the concern for the public safety because it was embedded violence and serious violence taking place. This, to me, is screaming it was planted. Everybody has denied from the convoy perspective that they had any link to these people with the guns, number 1. And number 2, it is my understanding that there were actually people from the convoy in Quds that told the RCMP, listen, there are people over there with guns. We have nothing to do with them, but go and arrest them. So clearly it was planted. And then here he's talking about, oh, because there were blockages in the airports. And what? Which airports? Not true. Here, from the Freedom Convoy Counselor, question on January 31st, the PM addressed the nation. Do you remember? No. How could you not remember? It's the most important thing that has happened in the history of Canada. So he said, the PM talked about the protest from the weekend. Do you want the transcript? And then he read the transcript. And of course, he talks about these words and the false accusation that the protesters were stealing food from the homeless. And then I can't even believe what I'm about to say. He responded, now I remember. And not only I remember, but I agree. Oh my gosh, what an entity. Question from the Justice Center Counselor. I really like this lawyer today. He's a little bit goofy for my taste, and he has done, in my opinion, not enough push for what he should be doing, but today he was fantastic. He asked for shorter answers, which nobody had ever asked, so I love him for that. And he said, you're just giving me a lot of noise, and I have very, very few minutes to ask you questions. So love that he finally told him, just give me the answers in a succinct way, but obviously impossible. Very many people felt threatened. Who talks like that? Nobody says very many people. Well, he did. Underlying threat of serious violence if it's a serious issue. Oh, sorry. So then the Justice Center Counselor said, it's a serious issue, but it's not serious violence. Intimidation and fear are not violence. Like if I feel fear of a spider, is that violence? I guess according to Blair, it's violence. Like how is that even possible to talk and think like that? There were threats of violence. Many people felt threatened. There were risk and danger. Many Canadians felt that the feelings, the perception of something in your head. The direct examination, sorry, this is a cross-examination from the government of Canada, looking at the plan, and then you're sitting down here. Do you know what this plan is referring to? I was never given the details of the plan. Well, it's not about the details, because that's not your job. You have told us several times during the day that it was not your job to look at the details, but the plan itself, nothing. Nothing. He was never presented with anything, but he kept on talking about the serious violence. There were hot tubs. That's violence to him. Interesting. Jerry cans that can produce an accent, and then the people were just pretending to have jerry cans, and then people were, because of the unlawful activity, they were putting bars in their windows due to the fear of this unsafe situation. What? Who put bars on the windows? I don't know what he's talking about. They just make so many lies. It's crazy. Number 4, government is seeking more control. We talked about the comment from David from the CSIS regarding the need to invade our lives a little bit more. They're not happy with the level of invasiveness. So here, the question from the Commission Council was, were the legal authorities sufficient to deal with the situation? And then he said, well, there were police challenges, there were no tow trucks, and then on top of that, we didn't have FinTrack FinTrack help because they couldn't look into the crowdfunding. So you can see how they're so interested in removing from us the independence of having financial ability that is outside of the control of the state. And then another thing that is a little bit concerning to me is that they are seeking also to have a little bit more of an ability to reinforce any type of law on regular streets, because as you may remember, Ambassador Bridge is actually at the end of Church Street. That is a regular street with schools and grocery stores and homes, etc. So they don't have the ability to do any type of law enforcement in the same manner that they can do in the bridge. Number 5, got caught in so many lies. You already have seen some of those. Here, Commission Councillor, you said the police just need to do their job. You thought the police was not doing enough. And then the answer was, well, initially the direction was incorrect. Allowing them in downtown was a mistake, but I'd never say that. So he presented this text. The police was finally doing their job in Windsor. They will go slow and do everything to avoid violence, but it appears they don't actually need to offer terms and concessions to the protesters. So you can see how he's not happy. He wants to give nothing, and he wants them out, and he wanted violence. So the Commission Councillor said, what do you mean by no concessions? I don't recall. I don't even know what to say. the OPP counselor. Question. OPP provided help to Ottawa. Slowly was complementary of Carrick, correct? I agree with that assessment. Question. And your opinion of Slowly? We worked together when I was in Toronto, and I have respect for the man. I don't talk like that. Those were his words, not mine. And then they brought up this. I doubt Peter is getting a lot of support in his new organization. They're likely sitting back and waiting for him to founder. But he likes and respects him. Again, lie after lie. This one was the best, and this is actually, it's incredible. Ferret, the question from the CCLA counselor. Between February 10, this is from February 10. Moving from the CSIS meetings to the IRG meetings, the federal government was feeling the pressure to do something. Were you ever embarrassed? The answer, we were concerned. You can see how he's just manipulating. He doesn't want to be cornered in the word pressure. So, in the word embarrassed, sorry. And then we were concerned about impact of critical infrastructure. We need to protect Canada. I never indulge in feeling embarrassed. So then the lady said, let me show you a text. And then he said, I am embarrassed for my former profession and worried to my government, which is being made to look very weak and ineffective. Do you see? He wanted violence. I can't believe that I am hoping that Doug Ford will save us. So clearly, zero respect for Doug Ford, and Doug Ford will not testify. Interesting. I wonder why. So he went on and on after he was presented with the text, because obviously he got caught in so many lies. And the last takeaway, the law is not the law, is whatever I interpret it to be. So here, when the Justice Center counselor was questioning, again, he did a fantastic job here, and this is the title of my video, because the question was, CSIS said that there was not a threat, and then the answer, very important, context is very important. CSIS said that they didn't meet the threshold to initiate an investigation, but for the purposes of the Emergency Act, I believe it has a broader application. What? So the agency dedicated to do intelligence is not the ultimate authority. Your interpretation of what they wrote is the authority. Interesting. The threat of violence existed. The threshold is different for the Emergency Act. Where is that written? Where is the law that says that? Nowhere. Then the narrow definition to open an investigation is different. When you can do an investigation from the CSI, is a narrow definition, but here's a broader definition. I have no comments. I really have no comments. It's very scary what these people are doing. In reference to the Emergency Act, this needs to be looked at. Wiretaps usage, for example. Excuse me? My God. So the Emergency Act uses a different definition. In my opinion, is appropriate and identify events and circumstances that were a threat. So in other words, it is okay for him to break the law. It needs revisions because it didn't meet the existing requirements. That's the most important thing he could have said. Point of view. These people do not represent us. They are not being ruled by the law. They modify the law as they please. We have seen multiple examples of changes. They take our money through our taxes to support an image of superiority, and they're supposed to be our servants. Do you think they are our servants? Look what this entity says about us, and we are the ones being investigated. Thank you for listening, and thank you in advance to Freedom Convoy 2.0. More details to come.